In today's episode, we'll be speaking with guests Deborah Piscioni and Josh Drean, co-founders of the Work3 Institute, an AI and Web3 advisory firm, and co-authors of the highly anticipated book, Employment is Dead: How Disruptive Technologies Are Revolutionizing the Way We Work. The book will be available on January 28, and you can pre-order your copy on Amazon now. Deborah Piscione is also a Silicon Valley serial entrepreneur, venture capitalist, and innovation and future of work thought leader. She is the author of multiple books, including the New York Times bestseller Secrets of Silicon Valley, and serves as a LinkedIn learning instructor on innovation and risk taking. Deborah's work has been covered in The Economist, New York Times, and Wall Street Journal, and is the subject of a GSB Stanford University case study on finding opportunity. She was previously a staffer in the US Congress and the White House, and served as an on-air commentator on CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News. In addition to co-founding the Work3 Institute with Deborah, Josh Drean is a workforce advisor at the Harvard Innovation Labs and an HR transformation expert who marries emerging technologies with workplace strategies. Josh's work has been featured in HBR, Forbes, Fast Company, and MIT Technology, and his YouTube channel has garnered millions of views. He earned his undergraduate degree in IO psychology and a master's degree at Harvard University, where he incubated and sold an HR tech startup. Welcome, Josh and Deborah, to the Expressions of Leadership podcast. I'm excited to have you join us here today.
Thanks for having us.
How did you both meet, and what spurred the co-founding of the Work3 Institute?
Well, that's a really fun story because I always tell people you got to be very open to serendipity. And that's exactly what happened between Josh and I when he applied to speak at a Web3 summit that myself and Val Bercovici were in the process of putting together. And we were getting dozens of applications every day. And I wasn't even the person that was vetting the applications initially, but I saw Josh's application and I pointed and I said, that's a book, that topic right there. And so we ended up collaborating and on this opportunity to write this book, and then realized there was such a need with enterprises that were really trying to figure out how to transform into the era of AI, but mostly what to do with their people as AI starts to impact the workforce.
Excellent. Josh, I didn't know if you had anything else you wanted to add to that.
Well, it's been quite a journey, right? From that moment that Deborah gave me a call and I said, let's see where this goes. Let's run this together. Our passions aligned so nicely that we co-founded the Work3 Institute, which the label Work3 is kind of a bit of a play on the word Web3, and has expanded more into emerging technologies. The main objective is to help companies today marry emerging technologies. It seems like there are so many today that are hard to get a handle on, and hard even more to how do we implement these? How do we give these to our people and do excellent work? So we marry emerging technologies with workforce strategies. And it's something that will continue to be, I think, as technology continues to augment human potential in the workplace, it's going to always be a need. And we're just really excited to be on the forefront of what that looks like and what that feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. And technology is rapidly changing. So we have to be able to keep up all of these organizations in order to make sure that they are, like you said, on the front end. Because at the end of the day, if we aren't actually on that front end, we're all following behind. So you both have quite different backgrounds and varying life and also career experiences. And how have these experiences shaped your personal philosophies of leadership? And have they changed maybe over time? I'll
I
start
think
with you, Deborah.
Sure. I think that's such a fantastic question, because, I've always questioned what leadership is in various phases of my career. And what I mean by that is I had an 18-year career in Washington, D.C., where I worked on Capitol Hill, fell into the White House, and then really fell into media. It wasn't anything that I intended to do. And after those 18 years before moving to Silicon Valley, I came to realize that I did great at two things. I learned how to put fear in people, because if you put fear in people, that's what galvanizes them to, whether it's you want to garner more viewers on your CNNs of the world, or you're running for office and you need more political donations. Fear is a great motivator from that sense. And I also learned how to divide people very well into an us versus them, because Washington, D.C. is a culture about dichotomies between Republicans and Democrats. So you're either with us or against us. And when you are indoctrinated into a culture and you think that's normal and everybody else operates that way, you have no reason to think that there could be other ways of, carrying out leadership in a more meaningful way. Fast forward, we moved to Silicon Valley in 2006, and it was a totally different style of leadership. It was much more about collaboration. It was much more about supporting each other. And yes, competition still exists, but you're also collaborating with your competitors to move the needle forward. And there were many, many sandboxes to play in. So it wasn't just, Democrat versus a Republican. It was, we're all in this kind of bubble-based economy, moving it along at a clip. And we realized that, really what it was you're on the trampoline in a particular technology, and it's adopted not only here in Silicon Valley, but the rest of the world. And then you're jumping on to that next trampoline. And so I learned a much kinder, gentler, more supportive way of leadership that I think the rest of the world can learn from. And it really is a unique anomaly to the way that Silicon Valley continues to operate.
I love that. And I would just kind of ride on the coattails there. Absolutely. This idea of moving from fear and my side versus the other side to this kind of empathetic, we are working together to build something. Just this ethos that Deborah has adopted living in Silicon Valley for so long at this point, and seeing that disruption and seeing that play out in the way that she runs her businesses, in the way that she writes her books, has been so fascinating to watch. I feel like my journey was very parallel to that as well. I remember taking all of these, IO psychology classes and behavioral design, and all of it was around leadership and the politics in the workplace. And you have all of these thought leaders saying everyone is a leader. And I thought that's so encouraging and so amazing. And then you enter the workforce and you start to realize that everyone's a leader only as far as the box we've put you in. And you need to lead in a very specific way, and I will take care of the rest. It's kind of this hierarchical system. And it just didn't sit well with me, which is kind of where we started to get this idea of employment is dead. That is the bold title of our book. It is something that Deborah and I put out there into the world, thinking that HBR would change the title because it was too bold. However, they loved it and felt it was just really true to the times that we're walking through. The whole premise of the book is that traditional models for employment are failing to adapt to the needs of the modern workforce. There are so many things that employees need and want in order to do an effective job. They're educated, they just graduated school, they're out into the workplace, and they want to contribute in ways that are meaningful, that have purpose behind it. And what we're seeing is that despite all of companies' best efforts, they are still stunted. They are still disengaged, which, the first paragraph of our book is talking about how the Gallup poll for disengagement hasn't moved the needle in decades. And so, the bold claim that we make is that employment is dead is simply saying that employees have evolved needs and we have emerging technologies that can meet these needs. However, we aren't moving the needle. So we write about what does this emerging technology mean? How can it move the needle? And we provide a playbook, a very rigorous playbook on what you can do to start today.
Yeah, and Michelle, I just want to follow up quickly, because I laugh in the sense that, I am a Gen Xer who has always lived the Gen Z lifestyle. I was always doing a lot of things. And the one thing that I've always been fascinated with, I know you're focused on leadership, but time. And I never understood, sitting in my Washington, D.C. office, if I had finished my work for the day at 2, why did I need to sit there until 6 for this FaceTime. And so you're almost penalized for working too smart or working too efficiently. And so this shift that we get into a lot in the book is we've got to get over this concept of time and really looking at output and productivity. And so as enterprises and companies continue to engage AI, we're going to get back a lot more time. And we need to understand at the end of the day, it's about a worker's contribution overall. And that's how people should be compensated, and not the hours of the workplace that they sit in their offices or type on their keystrokes. So it's a really interesting sort of juxtaposition of the work that is so outdated that really dates back to Taylorism in the early 20th century. We are at this place now that we can really, really reimagine what the workplace is and have a much better quality of life, because we are going to be granted back so much time with the adoption of AI technologies.
Yeah, that 9 to 5 is kind of out the window nowadays, right?
Yeah.
Especially as people are also joining workforces from around the world. How has that impacted the way you lead?
Yeah, I mean, closing the loop on kind of this, everyone's a leader in the workplace. Deborah and I actually believe it and are pushing forward on what that actually looks like. And we found that when you look at the traditional hierarchy, it's designed for a few shareholders, a few decision makers at the top to make all of the decisions, and that trickles down to the rest of the organization. We are seeing companies emerge that they're not a centralized company, they are a decentralized company. And what that means is that they have distributed the decision-making power across the organization. So even frontline workers are able to make decisions. They're able to be a leader in ways that we have said you can be a leader. And we're watching the collective wisdom of the group move an organization with more agility than we've ever seen before. And that to me is leadership, is giving up some of that power and control to the collective wisdom and the greater good.
Yeah, and on that note, Michelle, I mean, I think it's so critical, not only as serendipity, really critical in today's, paying attention to the signals, but also you have to be improvisational. And what I mean by that is there's value everywhere. And so for the future of any organization, a leader has to be open that maybe that 22-year-old who just came into your workforce has much better knowledge about the future of business and how the organization should be directed than the person with the highest paycheck in the room. And so, we have to recognize that, yes, we're going to have 3 to 4 generations at any given time in the workplace. This is the first time that the younger generation, Gen Z in particular, is going to add so much inherent value on the future course of business and the future enterprise.
And it's interesting you talk about that, because everyone talks about this, the challenges that come with these multi-generational workforces that we have today. I'm curious to know, for either of you, have you had any challenging situations either around that or perhaps around something else? And how did you handle that?
I can say that I have been that leader who really recognizes talent, no matter what someone's age is, their gender, their level of experience. If the talent's there, the talent's there. One of the questions I was asked recently when I participated in HBR's Future of Business conferences, what do we do with the older workers? Are they going to be obsolete? And it's not really about age or generation. You just have to have a growth mindset. You have to be willing to adopt the technologies of where the world is heading, because irrespective, this is the first time we're going to be dealing with Generation Z in a way that they really have been indoctrinated their entire lives in a way that point to the direction of future of business. So we have a lot more to learn from the younger generation, unfortunately. And hopefully we have, the wise abilities of the few who will be able to sustain their roles. But at the end of the day, AI can very much even replace the CEO in the future. And so we have to learn how to foster these innovative environments where there is psychological safety, there is empathy, there is inclusion, and wherever the value is, you have to bring people into the fold.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the split, the intergenerationalness of the workforce has never been greater, right? I think people are staying in their jobs longer. They aren't retiring at the time that they thought they were. And so you've got, a whole generation hanging on longer in the workplace and are more experienced, right? It's interesting to, they have experience well above and beyond Gen Z. But as Deborah said, Gen Z brings a whole different mindset. And so I always laugh when I read these articles about Gen Z is lazy, or you see stats coming out that a majority of leaders don't want to hire Gen Z because they are difficult to work with. The reason they're difficult to work with is because they're pushing against the norms. And they're not going to just push a button and complete tasks without knowing why. They want to see the big picture. They want purpose. They have so many other things that they want out of life and work that it just doesn't fit into the traditional model of employment. And so Deborah and I write heavily in the book about what we call the 10 operating principles of Work3, the non-negotiables of the modern workforce. These are the principles, right? The flexibility is the first principle. They want a flexible work arrangement. 9 to 5 doesn't make sense. Having only one job where they don't get to run at a side hustle, where they don't get to have a social presence, doesn't make sense. And so we're starting to see a bit of this bifurcation of the workforce.
Michelle, just to add to Josh's point, I mean, they don't have to be in the traditional workforce anymore. The rise of the portfolio career, where maybe you got an engineering degree, maybe you didn't go to college at all, but you can make a sustainable living driving for Uber, baking cookies and starting a company, and coding on the side. I mean, Josh and I, in the research of our book, came across so many extraordinary stories where the platforms like Upwork are really providing, a lot of flexibility that the traditional workforce is not, particularly when people were experiencing, a health crisis within their own families and they needed a lot of time off, or they needed to work on their own time. And so, we're not beholden to any one way anymore. And that's why when Josh mentions, this bifurcated work track, I mean, we're going to see this for the foreseeable future. You can remain in the traditional workforce and still have a side hustle, or you can completely have that portfolio career where you're kind of cobbling projects together that may end up being much more lucrative than that traditional career path.
And how do you encourage, when you think about leaders in these organizations who are bringing these people on board, to work with these people who are in these bifurcated tracks?
It's really interesting. I play more of the HR role in our relationship. And so when you look at it from a pure HR standpoint, part of your role is, and it's increasingly the majority of your role is, how do we engage people at work? How do we design an employee experience that they want to have? And so the first step that we advise people on before we even start talking about technology is, do you know your people? Do you understand their wants? Do you understand their needs? Do you understand what it feels like to work at this organization? And if there's a lot of question marks there, we need to start with some of the 101 basics of employee experience, which is, let's figure out what that looks like. Are you implementing one-on-ones? Are you tracking engagement? Are you providing surveys to collect some of this data? And from there, I feel like it's a pretty easy next step forward. We now know how they experience work and what they want and need. Now, how do we implement these insights in a way that benefits them? And you start to learn that it's a challenging thing in today's economy and in today's work environment. A perfect example is the RTO movement right now. There's a huge push to come back to the office, and a lot of employees don't want to. And we don't have to get too far into it, but at the end of the day, if employees feel like it isn't worth it, working for you in this environment, they're probably going to jump to a company that does offer flexibility. These are medium and large size businesses who say, hey, top talent, we have what you're looking for. And so obviously it's an employer's market right now and everyone's staying put. But what happens when Great Resignation 2.0 looms over us? That's the future that Deborah and I are keeping our eyes on.
Yeah, and just to add to what Josh is saying, we have got to stop thinking about people as cogs in the wheel. We're human, we're not robotic. We are at a point now where AI is going to allow us to embrace life stage flexibility. So perhaps if you were fresh out of college or you didn't go to college at all, because we very much question, the future of the college degree. But for the sake of argument, you're in your young 20s and you want to be around other people, you want a social life, you want to engage with people. You can be in the office 5 days a week. You can work a much shorter day. We can have tremendous benefit getting a lot of cars off the road, or staggering our workplace times and really very positively impact the environment overall. But perhaps you just had your first child and you only want to work 2 days a week. We are really now at this stage. We're so lucky to be living through these times where the flexibility is going to be key. And as a leader, the quicker you can adopt that mindset, just like as Josh mentioned, that's our first characteristic of this new mindset that we have to adopt, the faster you're going to be able to attract the younger generation to come work for you and really provide incredible productivity. I'm very excited about where the future is heading because I do think we're going to have an incredibly productive next few years as we continue to adopt these technologies.
And leaders often find it difficult to manage people who are working in a hybrid situation because they aren't in the office. They don't get to see them as much. So, what are some of the ways that you advise leaders to work with this situation and really build those relationships? Because, Josh, as you said, that's really important. Do you know your workers? Do you have that kind of relationship with them? Because they want to be cared for.
It's really interesting too, because a lot of it starts with a mindset shift. We talk about this often throughout the book. It is a large part of our last chapter with the roadmap. But the mindset shift is you're not competing against other companies anymore. You're competing against more attractive alternatives for work. You're competing against emerging technology like AI. And, so with all of these question marks, it's an opportunity for us to kind of bring them back to their roots. And so one thing that we do is we have this productivity fulfillment matrix where we help a company find where are they on the matrix of, are you just driving for productivity and that's all you've cared about and your people are just a number? There are plenty of companies out there, I would argue a majority, that just see human resources as that. You're just a resource at the organization, a line on the balance sheet, if you will. But what about the fulfillment element? Because a lot of research shows that like a happier, less stressed workforce is more creative, they're more productive. So we need to first diagnose you, where are you on the spectrum? And then how do we kind of not just push on the productivity and the ROI, but also the employee satisfaction, the well-being of an organization. If you find that your employees are at the exact same level of burnout that they were at the height of the pandemic, we have found a huge problem and we need to fix that first and foremost. And then the stress that comes along with AI, right? AI is that going to replace the workforce? Is it going to augment the workforce? And Deborah gives keynotes on this all the time. So maybe she can talk a little bit about AI specifically.
That's a great question that Josh raises. Obviously there's a lot of uncertainty with AI coming in to potentially replace jobs. And the fact of the matter is it is without a doubt going to happen. And I think we're going to go through phases where initially, we see jobs combined, 2, 3 workers will combined into one. And so we all need to figure out that we are going to be living in a time where we're going to see half skills because it's going to be half time that skills are valid. And before we move on to the next thing, because, AI is one thing to talk about, but then Web3 technologies, which we haven't addressed yet, one being the blockchain, digital twinning, the metaverse, There's so much more to come in how we will work in the future with these decentralized opportunities that, also are not just global, but 24/7, and, very exciting ways where we get the opportunity to really decide the type of work we want to do at what stage of our lives and what stage of our growth overall. So it's extremely exciting. But back to your question about, leadership connecting and really getting to know their people. The one thing I really value in Silicon Valley is, we've never done things kind of the norm, the expected way. And so, you do see companies here where there's a Friday hike. There's Tuesday lunches together. There's all sorts of ways where you can get to know your people outside of work. And at the end of the day, you just want to make sure that the productivity is happening. There's opportunities to come together, to collaborate and innovate, and really getting the best version of each other. And that's really where I think the excitement is, the future, as we think about productivity and the future of work and the future of business.
What were some of the values that you drew upon when you were writing this book or creating this organization?
Josh and I live in different cities. So the first thing we did was Josh flew in. I picked him up at the airport for the first time. And we had this writing retreat and brainstorming retreat in Napa Valley. And I really got to know him as a person, as a husband, as a father. And I think he can say the same. And, it is so critical that we get back to a place where, as I mentioned earlier, empathy, inclusion, getting to know people beyond their day-to-day job is really what's going to be part of the winning strategy and leadership moving forward. And Josh, I don't know if you have a lot to add here. I suspect you do, but I know for Josh and myself, this is who we truly are. There wasn't anything I think either one of us had to adopt that was inherently different from our values in the workplace.
Yeah, and it's been interesting too to watch Deborah and I come from different generations and different backgrounds come together in this way where the values are so aligned. And it's not just me and her, it's the values of an entire generation and an entire workforce, right? I was raised in this YouTube era. We call it the anything economy in the book, where you could be anything and say anything within reason and build a community and then monetize it in a way that you can essentially make money doing what you love, which I don't think was quite the option, during the Industrial Revolution when, you were in factories 9 to 5 pushing buttons and doing that work. I think an entire generation has now kind of woken up a little bit to say, hey, I don't necessarily have to follow my mom and dad's path, the traditional 9 to 5. I'm seeing people that inspire me that are doing a side hustle or a full hustle, right? In a way that helps them. So I guess I'm saying that because my ethos at my core is that we only have one life and we shouldn't spend it lining someone else's pockets. We should find what we love to do and do more of that. I think that's the ethos of Gen Z and Gen Alpha as well, as they start to discover who they are. They want a community. They want interoperability, which is to work for several companies and several projects at the same time. They want to add value in ways that don't just go, towards the shareholder. And so there's so much to unpack there. But traditional corporations, when they can't find out why Gen Z doesn't want to work for them, and they start labeling them, the companies that are going to win are very simply the ones who say, Gen Z, what do you want? We're going to do everything we can to give it to you. And we're seeing companies like Spotify do that and win. And that's exciting to me.
What's so interesting about this time, Michelle, and Josh mentioned YouTube, but you look at the power of Reddit. as well. And, you know, obviously it started with Occupy Wall Street and then what happened with GameStop. I mean, we're starting to see what we perceive to be as impossible actually possible. And so if you don't wake up as a leader and realize you can't control, you know, you can't be the puppeteer anymore, sitting at the top of your, you know, golden staircase, if you will. This generation has more power to make change, to make impact than we have ever witnessed before. It's almost like we're seeing a flip of the pyramid and the hierarchy. And so you really need to wake up to the reality of what's going on. And, you know, we are in this period of globalization. In some respects, we are very ahead of the game in AI, but there's other regions and other countries that are adopting it much faster and creating the future of this workforce faster than we are here in the US. And so leadership is more critical than ever in being able to turn the tide. And sometimes you just don't have the right leader at the top. Sometimes you don't have the right middle managers. And you know, the C-suite's going to have to recognize really where that critical change is going to be needed to be met in order to survive in this next generation of work.
You're really speaking to the value and importance of recognizing, as Josh had put this before, the leadership in everyone. Everyone is a leader.
Yep.
How do we recognize that? And how do we open up the door for that? Because in fact, that will allow us to be that much more productive, that much more innovative, that much more successful. That also requires us to make sure that we are enabling those leaders, that we're helping them to grow as leaders. What inspires you to continue growing as a leader?
You know, I got a passion for Web3 because my kids came to me in middle school and said, invest in this Bitcoin. So, you know, I was very curious about crypto because you never thought, being a Gen Xer that I am, that you could actually challenge, you know, the financial banking system as we know it, that there could be an alternative way. And so I was very fascinated by what was going on in these discussion groups around, you know, this very fundamental change you can make in a way. And at the end of the day, you have to recognize that any person in any corner of the company can bring forth the next big idea that increases existing revenue streams, or, you know, even generates new revenue streams for the company. Because what I found in my innovation work, it's often the people closest to the job, the people you know, who bring outside experiences, ways they spend time on the weekends that they have great passion for, that can bring it into the workforce. And that's where those big ideas sit. And so, you know, if we continue to lead in a way where the people who have the most experience, the eldest people in the room, the biggest paycheck, we're really going to miss out on tremendous opportunity and ways to which we grow our organizations.
You have a lot of wisdom to share. So thank you for doing this. This has been incredible. And I can't wait to really dive even deeper into your book, because I think this is something that all leaders really need going forward. So
Thank you so much.
if you could leave a post-it note for the world, what would it say?
What a wide, expansive question. We all have one life to live. We weren't meant to play it safe. If you really want an extraordinary life, you have to take risk. And sometimes those risks work, sometimes they don't, but you're always going to learn from taking that risk. So the question is, do you want to live an extraordinary life or an ordinary life? And I know where I fall, and I hope to inspire others to follow suit.
Thank you, Deborah. Josh, what about you? If you could leave a post-it note for the world, what would it say?
Empathy scales better than algorithms.
Mm.
It was my reminder to the world that no matter how advanced technology becomes, human connection and understanding remain irreplaceable. So empathy skills better than algorithms.
So important to have that empathy in the workplace. People often forget that, or people think, oh, we need to leave emotions outside of the workplace because it's unprofessional. And I think that goes back to what you were saying too, Josh, that that's really sort of this old way of thinking. And if we're not bringing empathy to the workplace, people are out of there because they want to feel like you care about them.
Yep.
That's so incredibly important these days. I think that's a great takeaway. And now for a final fun question. What's something that you've always wanted to do but haven't done yet? And if you haven't done it yet, then why not? Deborah.
Hot air balloon ride.
Okay.
And I'm working in that direction to do that thing. But I would say yeah, for sure.
And what's prevented you from doing that so far?
I think because I wanted my spouse and my kids involved, and if we're either all in it together or not at all. Couldn't get everybody on board all at once.
And Josh, what about you?
I would say walk across the Golden Gate Bridge in
Oh,
San Francisco. Have not done that.
Josh, we'll do it the next time you're in town.
Yes, I was going to say cars are going to prevent me from doing that. I don't even know if there is a walkway.
It is a walkway. So
Okay.
yes, you actually will be able to do that. And I don't think the cars will prevent you on the day you want to go. It might be fog and other things that might not make it as beautiful, but go in October, September, October, right, Deborah? That's the best time to be
Yep,
in the San
for
Francisco
sure.
area. Definitely a lot more clear skies and a little warmer, quite frankly.
Yeah, although I'll say we're having a beautiful, beautiful winter or whatever fall so far. So yeah, a lot better weather than you're having, Josh.
Minneapolis is not the place to be come.
Again, well, thank you both so much for joining our podcast today and for sharing your wisdom, your stories, your advice. And I also want to thank our audience for tuning in and spending your time with us today. We really appreciate you being here. I hope you've learned a great deal from Deborah and Josh. Again, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.